Our guest today is chair of the Senate Intelligence Committee, Senator Tom Cotton from Dardanelle, Arkansas. Senator Cotton, thank you for coming to the Doc Washburn Show. How are you today?
Hey, Doc. I'm doing very well. I hope you and all your listeners are well, too.
Yes, sir. Good to hear from you. National Counterterrorism Center Director Joe Kent recently announced the Biden administration allowed 18,000 individuals with ties to known and suspected terrorists to enter our country. So the FBI is now announcing they've arrested 5 members of a radical pro-Palestinian group accused of plotting a series of New Year's Eve bombings across L.A. and New Orleans. Students were shot dead at Brown University in Rhode Island the other day by a guy yelling Allah Akbar. The guy who shot our National Guard blocks from the White House recently was yelling Allah Akbar. And ABC News Australia says one of the Muslim gunmen who killed at least 15 Jewish folks just trying to celebrate Hanukkah on the beach was on Australia's domestic intelligence agency's radar years ago for his close ties to ISIS. I think what my listeners want to know, what a lot of us believe is, it just seems like a matter of time until the next 9/11 attack in our country. What can we do to try to keep that from happening?
Look, first off, let me join Arkansans in offering prayers to those 2 young students who were killed at Brown over the weekend, and also congrats to the administration on stopping this. And I share those concerns, Doc. If you look, as Joe Kent said, at the number of potential terrorists that entered our country that we know about. And, Doc, that's just the ones that we have some reason to think so.
Yeah.
I mean, remember, you're talking millions or more than 10 million migrants entered our country. Just because they're not on some terrorist watch list doesn't mean they're not Islamic radicals. They don't come from a country or a culture that hates America and hates Jews and wants to kill us.
Right.
So the administration is working hard to try to go back and scan through all of those people that came in. It's going to take some work. In the meantime, very vigilant on counterterrorism efforts, as you saw in the news from California. But this is just the wages of what Joe Biden did and the Democrats' general approach to open borders. Not only should we not have open borders, we should be skeptical of mass migration from countries and cultures that hate America and want to see Americans killed and that hate Jews. Look at what happened in Australia, Doc.
Yeah.
You had a man who immigrated there from Pakistan 25 years ago, and his son, who was born in Australia, who knew no country other than Australia, but still joined in this horrific anti-Semitic massacre. It just goes to show how deep these cultural heritages can run, even if you're not from a country.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely correct. And now witnesses, survivors of the Australian massacre, are talking about the fact there were 4 Australian police officers just standing there, not doing anything for 20 minutes while the shooting went on. I don't even know how to wrap my mind around that. But you made a very good point. The 18,000 number that Joe Kent came up with is just the tip of the iceberg, because we don't have any idea how many people came across that porous border, how many gotaways there were. There could be, multiples of that. By the way, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, I mean, one good example is the terrible shooting over the Thanksgiving holiday weekend.
Okay, we lost you there. After Thanksgiving holiday weekend, you kind of shorted out on us. Sorry.
Yeah, so Doc, you had the shooting in Washington, D.C. over the Thanksgiving holiday weekend by 2 young guardsmen from West Virginia by Afghan immigrant. And it said that he was vetted in Afghanistan to work with our intelligence agencies and our military. No doubt that he was, Doc. I was there. I saw that happen. But the vetting that we apply to people to man a gate or work in the kitchen or serve as an interpreter is, of course, very different than what Arkansans would expect to be bringing someone to our country and having them live in our communities and send their kids to our schools. It's a horse of a different color.
Well, it really is, not to mention the fact that we heard horror stories when Afghanistan was falling, that the security for people to get into that airport, to get on these planes, was done by the Taliban. And so a lot of folks got on those planes that clearly were not vetted. Let me ask you, while we're at it, when you served in the Army of Afghanistan, there were green on blue attacks, people in the Afghan Army shooting and killing coalition soldiers, including Americans. Reuters now reporting the American service members and their interpreters killed when a Syrian blew himself up near them on Saturday were victims of a green-on-blue attack committed by a guy who was a member of Syria's armed forces. What are we doing in Syria? Why are we even there?
It's my understanding, Doc, that those troops are part of the small force we have in eastern Syria that's still working on guarding a large ISIS presence. You have a prison in eastern Syria.
Yeah.
President Trump has cut the presence down from about a little over 2,000 to a little under 1,000.
Yeah.
I know that he's eager to bring the presence down to zero. I think most of us would like to be as well.
Yeah.
I think the toughest nut to crack in Syria with the new government is maintaining the lid on ISIS and especially all of those ISIS prisoners. And as you said, although apparently this assailant was a member of Syrian security forces,
yeah.
That he was not on the patrol. At least that's the latest information I have. So he ambushed them from a hidden position. And as the president said over the weekend, the new Syrian president, who has a checkered past of his own, but says to turn over a new leaf, is also appalled by the attack and trying to go back through and rid his security services of these extremists. But again, it's hard to do in a place like Syria, Doc. It's just really hard.
Oh, yeah. Well, I appreciate you mentioning that Giuliani has a checkered past. I think he might have a checkered present for that matter. I'm going to nominate you for Nobel Prize for understatement on that one. Look, I would be remiss in my duty if I didn't at least tell our audience that you do have a book out called 7 Things You Can't Say About China, an unflinching look at hidden dangers of China's global influence, which I highly recommend. Way back in February 2020, you suggested we should at least look into the possibility that COVID-19 might have come from the lab in Wuhan, China. You were roundly excoriated for having the gall to question the establishment narrative on that. Back in January of this year, you released a statement noting the CIA finally admitted the lab leak theory is the most plausible explanation of COVID's origins, and now the most important thing is to make China pay for unleashing a plague on the world. Now, that is a great idea, but how do we do that?
Yeah, Doc, well, you've been great on the threat from communist China as well, and I know all your listeners are very concerned about it. Back in 2020, look, I didn't have any kind of special scientific knowledge or classified intelligence. I just followed my common sense, given the facts at hand. I mean, they claim that this virus came from a food market, where bats weren't even sold, even though the food market was like 3 blocks away from China's biggest super lab that investigated bat-based coronaviruses and had a long and dubious history of lab safety. And look what that plague unleashed on the world. So I think it's well past time to hold China accountable for that and for all of its other crimes against our farmers and our manufacturers, what they've done to move industries to China, what they still threaten to do. So there's a lot of steps we could take. I would revoke permanent most favored nation status from China. I believe the president's taking the right steps on trying to target China for its unfair and deceptive trade practices, dumping its products below cost, subsidizing its own state enterprises, attacking American companies by stealing their technology and intellectual property. There's a whole host of steps we could take to impose consequences on China, not just for unleashing the COVID plague on the world, but for their many other crimes against Americans' well-being and prosperity and safety.
No question, no question. We're speaking with Senator Tom Cotton on the Doc Washburn Show. Senator Cotton, to the extent that the average American is paying attention to our interactions with Venezuela, he or she may be aware that we've been blowing up drug smuggling boats, narco-terrorists, if you will, but Venezuela is a complicated, multifaceted situation. What's the best way to explain what's going on there and what we're trying to do about it?
Yeah, Venezuela is unique in Latin America, Doc. Many countries in Latin America source drugs, and their governments and institutions are weak, and they don't have total control over their territory, and cartels are able to operate in them. Venezuela is unique in that it actively conspires and collaborates with these drug cartels, and it benefits from the drugs that transship through Venezuela. Furthermore, Venezuela is deeply in league with communist China and with Russia and with Iran and with North Korea and Cuba. So at every turn, Venezuela is spreading instability and anti-American violence and reactionary movements through Latin America. The biggest impact that we see in Arkansas, of course, is what drugs have done to our communities. More than 400 Arkansans died last year of drug overdoses. Tens of thousands of Americans died. And again, Venezuela is in league with these drug cartels. What President Trump is doing is taking the fight straight to those cartels. When they put drugs in a boat, and we can with reasonable confidence say that it's full of drugs and it's crewed only by drug traffickers, he's putting those boats in the bottom of the ocean. I think that's exactly what we should be doing. I think most Arkansans, especially those who have seen our streets flooded with drugs, would agree.
No, I think you're absolutely correct. We were talking about COVID a minute ago. I know you have to leave here in a couple of minutes, but with all the stuff that's coming out, the FDA is concerned about the vaccines, the myocarditis. Is there going to be any accountability for the vaccines that so many people were forced to take?
Yeah, and Doc, I know you had your personal run-in with this as well. Obviously, we had thousands of troops who were drummed out of our military by the Biden administration because they didn't want to take this novel experimental vaccine. I think they did that in part because they viewed it as kind of an ideological purity test. We've taken steps to reinstate them. President Trump has made it clear that he wants to go back and look at exactly what happened, especially with these mandates, especially onerous mandates that cost people their jobs in businesses all across the country, and try to make it right. It's obviously never going to be 100% right for those people, but right, to do what we can to try to make it right, and as important, to make sure it doesn't happen again.
Exactly. Well, from your lips to God's ears, U.S. Senator Tom Cotton, chair of the Senate Intelligence Committee and native of Dardanelle, Arkansas. It's always a pleasure to be speaking with you. It's been too long, and we hope you can come back on again sometime.
Great. Look forward to it, Doc. Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year to you and all your listeners.
Same to you, sir. Thank you, Tom Cotton. God bless you. Thank you.